The waste disposal chutes of mining station Helios 7 weren't meant for living things, but that's where Juno Castellan found her. He'd been crawling through the maintenance tunnels for 3 hours, chasing a persistent malfunction in the atmospheric recyclers. The work was mindless, repetitive, exactly what he needed these days. No complex decisions, no lives hanging in the balance, just broken machines that either worked or didn't. Simple problems with simple solutions, unlike the mess he'd made of his previous life. The asteroid moon Piralis spun slowly beneath the station, its scarred surface catching the distant light of the system's twin suns. Through the narrow viewport in the tunnel, Juno could see the mining operation's massive extractors tearing into the rock, searching for the rare minerals that made this godforsaken place profitable. He'd been here 2 years now, long enough to stop flinching at the constant vibration of heavy machinery, long enough to accept that this was what his life had become. The thermal scanner in his toolkit chirped softly as he passed the waste disposal junction. He paused, frowning at the readout, heat signature, faint but definitely organic. Probably another dead mining rat. The station was infested with them, scavengers that had somehow made it aboard supply ships and adapted to the artificial environment. But as he adjusted his headlamp and peered into the disposal chute, the beam caught something that made his breath stop. Not a rat. Not refuse. A woman, or something that had once been shaped like one. She lay crumpled against the curved wall of the chute, barely visible beneath a layer of metallic dust and debris. Her skin had an ethereal quality, pale as starlight but touched, with an inner luminescence that pulsed weakly beneath the grime. Long silver hair spread around her like liquid mercury, matted with oil and particles from the station's waste stream. Juno's xenobiology training kicked in automatically, cataloging details even as his hands shook. Humanoid structure but elongated proportions, distinctive cranial ridges barely visible beneath the filth. Clothing that had once been fine synthetic fabric, now torn and stained beyond recognition. She was alive. Barely. "Hey," he whispered, not wanting to startle her. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. Large, opalescent things that seemed to hold the light of distant nebulae. For a moment they fixed on nothing, pupils dilated with shock or drugs. Then they found his face behind the safety visor, and something shifted in their depths. Terror. But not of him, of something else, something far worse. Her lips moved, forming words so soft he almost missed them. "Please. I can serve you well. I know how to please. Just don't send me back." The words hit Juno like a physical blow. He'd heard similar phrases before during his years studying trauma responses in displaced alien populations. The flat effect, the automatic, offering of the self as commodity. It was a survival mechanism, learned through repetition and reinforced by necessity. Someone had taught her that her body was the only currency she possessed. "No," he said quickly, pulling off his work gloves. "No, you don't need to do anything. I'm going to help you, okay? My name is Juno." She blinked slowly, as if processing this information was difficult. Her breathing was shallow, labored. Hypothermia, dehydration, possibly worse injuries hidden beneath the debris. Juno made a decision that would have been automatic once back, when he was Dr. Juno Castellan instead of just another maintenance worker with a past he preferred not to discuss. He activated his emergency beacon and began carefully lifting her from the chute. She was lighter than he expected. Her alien physiology adapted for a different gravity than the standard Earth normal the station maintained. As he lifted her, she made a sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a sigh. It was the sound of someone who had learned not to expect gentleness. "I've got you," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I've got you." The journey back through the maintenance tunnels was a nightmare of careful maneuvering and whispered reassurances. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her bioluminescent skin flickering erratically like a dying star. Twice she stirred enough to speak, and both times the words were the same practiced litany, variations on submission, on usefulness, on the desperate mathematics of survival. Each time, Juno felt something break a little more inside his chest. His quarters were in the old section of the station, where the corridors were wider and the surveillance less comprehensive. It wasn't much, a single room with a fold-out bed, a tiny kitchenette, and a viewport that looked out onto the mining operation, but it was private. That was all that mattered now. He laid her on his bed and activated the room's medical scanner, a basic unit designed for minor injuries and routine health monitoring. The readings that flickered across the display made his stomach clench. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, signs of systematic physical abuse. The scanner flagged several substances in her bloodstream, sedatives, compliance drugs, other chemicals he didn't recognize but could guess at their purpose. As he worked to clean the worst of the debris from her skin, she began to stir again. Her eyes opened fully this time, tracking his movements with a mixture of confusion and learned wariness. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice stronger now, but still carrying that terrible, practiced cadence of someone accustomed to having her questions ignored. "My quarters. You're safe here." He set down the cleaning cloth and met her gaze directly. "What's your name?" She hesitated, and for a moment he saw something flicker across her features. Surprise, maybe, that he had asked. They called me many things, but I remember. Zephyra. My name is Zephyra." Zephyra. He repeated it carefully, giving the syllables weight. "It's beautiful." She stared at him as if he'd spoken in an alien language, which, he reflected, he might as well have. Compliments without expectation, kindness without transaction. These were foreign concepts to someone who had been reduced to commodity. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. It was a simple question with a complicated answer. "Because I used to be someone who helped people. Because I failed at that once, and maybe this is my chance to remember who I was. Because no one should die, alone in a waste disposal chute." Instead, he said, "Because you need help." She processed this, her luminescent features shifting through expressions he couldn't entirely read. Finally, she nodded once, a tiny gesture that somehow felt momentous. "Are you hungry?" he asked. The look that crossed her face then, raw, desperate gratitude mixed with disbelief, told him everything he needed to know about how long it had been since someone had offered her food without demanding payment. As he prepared a simple meal from his emergency rations, Juno felt something stirring in his chest that he'd thought was dead forever. Purpose, maybe. Or just the basic human need to matter to someone, somewhere. Behind him, Zephyra had curled onto her side, watching his every movement with those impossible eyes. She didn't speak, but when he glanced back at her, she was still there, still breathing, still alive. It was a start. 3 weeks had passed since Juno found Zephyra in the disposal chutes, and the transformation was remarkable. Her bioluminescent patterns had strengthened, creating intricate designs that shifted across her skin like living art. The hollow look in her opalescent eyes had been replaced by something cautious, but unmistakably alive. She still flinched sometimes when he moved too quickly, still caught herself mid-sentence when she began to offer services she thought he expected. But increasingly, there were moments of genuine peace between them, shared meals where she actually smiled, quiet conversations where she spoke of things beyond survival. "Tell me about your world," Juno said one evening as they sat by the viewport, watching the mining extractors carve glowing scars into Paralysis' surface. Zephyra's fingers traced patterns on the condensation that had formed on the inner glass. Viridia was green. Everything was green and gold and growing. We lived in harmony with the coral forests, our cities built among the branches rather than replacing them. Her voice carried a wistful quality he'd never heard before. I was studying to become a harmony keeper, someone who maintains the balance between technology and nature. What happened? Her luminescence dimmed slightly. Raiders. They came for genetic material, for breeding stock. My people's adaptability made us valuable, she paused, her reflection wavering in the glass. They separated us by perceived utility, some for labor, some for experimentation, some for... She didn't need to finish. Juno felt the familiar weight of old anger settling in his chest. I'm sorry. You weren't there. You have nothing to apologize for. Someone should apologize. Someone should acknowledge what was done to you. She turned to look at him then, her alien features soft in the artificial light. You do that every day, just by treating me like... She searched for the words. Like I matter. The moment was interrupted by the sharp chime of the door's proximity sensor. Juno's blood went cold. No one visited his quarters. Ever. That was part of the unspoken agreement that allowed him to remain on Helios 7 without too many questions about his past. Stay quiet, he whispered to Zephyra, who had already begun to retreat toward the sleeping alcove. The door slid open to reveal Commander Thane Valdris, the station's security chief. He was a tall man with the kind of military bearing that never fully left, even in civilian settings. His dark eyes swept the room methodically before settling on Juno with undisguised suspicion. Castellan, routine inspection. Of course. Juno stepped aside, trying to keep his body language casual despite the hammering of his heart. Is there a specific concern? Valdris moved through the small space like a predator, examining everything with professional thoroughness. We've had some irregularities in the waste management systems, missing food supplies, increased water usage in this sector. His gaze lingered on the makeshift sleeping arrangements, the extra dishes in the small sink. From the sleeping alcove came the faintest sound, fabric rustling as Zephyra tried to make herself smaller. Valdris's head snapped toward the sound. What was that? Ventilation system, Juno said quickly. It's been acting up. I've filed 3 maintenance requests. The commander's eyes narrowed. He took a step toward the alcove and Juno felt desperation claw at his throat. If Valdris discovered, Zephyra, she would be classified as contraband, possibly dangerous alien material. Best case scenario, she'd be shipped off to a research facility. Worst case? Commander. Juno's voice was steadier than he felt. Is there something specific you're looking for? I have work to finish before the next shift. Valdris paused, his attention shifting back to Juno. You know, Castellan, I've always wondered what a man with your credentials is doing fixing air recyclers on a mining station. Dr. Juno Castellan, formerly of the Terran Xenobiological Institute, published researcher, decorated field scientist. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Juno had known this moment would come eventually. His past wasn't buried as deeply as he'd hoped. People change careers, he said simply. Some do. Others run from their mistakes. Valdris stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. The Kepler station incident. 43 dead because someone released classified information about a first contact scenario. Information that was supposed to be secured. Juno's hands clenched into fists. That was ruled an accident. System failure. Was it? Or was it guilt? Did you leak that data, Doctor? Did you think the galaxy had a right to know about the ethereals? Consequences be damned. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Juno had never leaked the data. The security breach had been traced to a corrupt AI system. But he had argued for disclosure. He had believed that first contact should be humanity's triumph, not its secret. When people died because of the chaos that followed the leak, he had blamed himself anyway. I resigned, Juno said quietly. I took responsibility, and now you're here, hiding in the outer rim, pretending to be someone else. Valdris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Makes a man wonder what else you might be hiding. Another sound from the alcove, a soft intake of breath that was unmistakably alien. Valdris drew his sidearm in one fluid motion, keeping it trained on Juno while moving toward the sleeping area. Step away, Castellan. Commander, please. Step away. Juno raised his hands, his mind racing. He could try to overpower Valdris, but the man was younger, stronger, trained for combat. He could try to explain, but what explanation would satisfy someone who already saw him as a traitor? Valdris reached the alcove and pulled back the privacy curtain. Zafira sat huddled in the corner, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly with fear. She looked up at the commander with those impossible eyes, and Juno saw her entire body language shift. The careful progress of weeks dissolved in an instant, replaced by the programmed responses of someone who had learned to survive through submission. Please, she whispered, her voice taking on that terrible, practiced cadence. I can be useful. I can serve. Just don't hurt him. Valdris stared at her for a long moment, his weapon never wavering. What is it? She, Juno corrected automatically. Her name is Zafira. It's an unregistered alien. Potential biological hazard, security risk, contraband. Valdris activated his comm unit. This is Commander Valdris requesting immediate containment. Protocols for... Stop! The word came out harder than Juno intended. He stepped forward, ignoring the weapon pointed at his chest. She's not contraband. She's a person. She's illegal alien material that you've been harboring in violation of. She's someone who was thrown away to die, and I chose to help her. Juno's voice grew stronger, driven by a conviction he hadn't felt in years. If that makes me a criminal, then so be it. Valdris' finger moved toward the trigger of his weapon. You're under arrest for... Wait! Zafira's voice cut through the tension, soft but carrying an authority that hadn't been there before. She rose to her feet, her luminescent patterns shifting to something Juno had never seen, not fear, not submission, but defiance. I am Zafira of the Coral Reaches, daughter of the Harmony Keepers of Viridia. I am not contraband. Her opalescent eyes fixed on Valdris with unwavering intensity. I am a refugee seeking sanctuary, and under the Galactic Accords on displaced persons, I have the right to claim protection. Valdris hesitated, clearly not having expected this response. Zafira continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. This man found me dying and chose compassion over protocol. He has asked nothing of me except that I heal. He has given me back my name, my dignity, my choice. She took a step forward, placing herself between Juno and the weapon. If you wish to arrest someone for the crime of kindness, then arrest us both. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Finally, Valdris lowered his weapon, though he didn't holster it. The next transport to the inner colonies leaves in 6 hours, he said quietly. Be on it, both of you. Juno felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. Commander, 6 hours, Castellan. After that, I file a full report on everything I've seen. Here. Valdris looked at Zafira one more time, something unreadable flickering across his features. The Outer Rim colonies don't ask as many questions. Might be a better place for someone looking to start over. He turned and left without another word, leaving Juno and Zafira alone in the sudden silence. Thank you, Juno whispered. Zafira's bioluminescent patterns had shifted again, now showing something that looked almost like joy. Thank you for teaching me that I was worth defending. 6 hours later, they stood in the docking bay watching the stars wheel past the viewport of the transport ship Wanderer's Hope. The destination, New Harmony, a frontier colony that specialized in xenobiological research and refugee resettlement. Are you afraid? Zafira asked as they settled into their seats. Juno considered the question. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from his past. He was running toward something new, toward the possibility of being useful again, of making amends through action rather than hiding. No, he said, and meant it. I'm hopeful. Zafira's hand found his as the ship engaged its jump drive, and together they leaped into the unknown, leaving behind the broken pieces of who they had been to discover who they might become.